So this guy stole a dead body, and Gene Hackman watched him get arrested for it. The story is wild. So it all starts with this guy, Gram. And Gram is a rock country musician living in California, and he's not super famous, but he influenced some very famous bands. He influenced the Rolling Stones, he influenced the Eagles, but Gram has a problem. He really loves drugs, like the hard stuff. Bro is always high on something. And one day in 1973, he and some friends take a little trip out to Joshua Tree. Joshua Tree is a desert in California where hippies like to go and do drugs. So he and some friends end up in this hotel around Joshua Tree. Now, one of his friends is supposed to be in charge of making sure Gram doesn't overdo it with all the drugs he takes. This guy, Michael Martin. And Michael Martin is Gram's friend and his assistant. However, at one point, Michael Martin leaves the hotel to go pick up some Zaza, and he leaves Gram there alone with two ladies. And so Gram is there, and he starts trying to talk his lady friends into drinking tequila with him. And the two ladies are like, nah. And so Gram's like, cool, more tequila for me. And he drinks a ton. Then, once he's all wasted, he decides it'll be a good idea to do some morphine. So then he does a ton of that. Then, as you can imagine, I guess he does too much, and suddenly, boom, Gram becomes unresponsive. And the ladies are like freaking out, like, oh my god, he just OD'd. Then one of the ladies is like, I know what to do. And she gets some ice, because, you know, hotels always have ice. So she gets some ice cubes, pulls down Gram's pants, and shoves the cubes directly up Gram's butt. Like, she actually gives him an ice cube suppository. And surprisingly, this works. It like jolts him awake, and he gets up and he's like walking around the room, and now he suddenly seems fine. However, shortly after he sits down, he falls back asleep, and he eventually stops breathing. And again, the ladies are freaking out, and they don't know what to do, so they call an ambulance. But unfortunately, it's too late, and Gram has overdosed, and he doesn't make it. And as crazy as that is, it's not nearly as crazy as the attempt to steal his body. So 2 months before this, Gram just happened to be attending a funeral. And he's there with this guy, Kaufman. Kaufman is Gram's tour manager. And at some point during this funeral, Gram turns to Kaufman and he says, man, when I die, just spread my ashes out in Joshua Tree. And Kaufman hears this and he's like, all right. And so fast forward 2 months, and now Gram has died. And Kaufman, I guess, he wants to be a real one and grant Gram his last wish. Scatter his ashes in Joshua Tree. And so Kaufman calls the local coroner's office, and he asks where Gram's body is. And they inform him that Gram's body is actually about to be flown from California all the way back to Louisiana so he can be buried there, where some of his family lives. And Kaufman can't let that happen. So he comes up with a plan to steal Gram's body and take it back to Joshua Tree. First, he contacts Michael Martin and gets him involved in this scheme. Then, the two dress up like they work at a funeral home. Then, they decide they need a hearse to pull this off. And by sheer coincidence, one of the women Gram was with in the hotel room when he died just so happens to own a hearse. And it's a piece of shit, and it's all run down, and it has no license plates, but it's a hearse. So they borrow it. Then they decide that they don't like the way they look in their formal funeral home outfits, and they change into new outfits, dressing up like cowboys for some reason. And then they get really drunk so that they have the confidence to commit the crime that they're about to commit. And so Kaufman and Michael Martin, drunk, dressed like cowboys, they start driving this hearse to the Los Angeles airport to intercept Gram's body and stop it from being shipped to Louisiana. So they get there, and they're at the airport, and they pull up to the loading dock, which is basically just a big airplane hangar. And there's a lot of cargo there, including the casket with Gram's body in it. And then Kaufman uses his manager charm to convince the dock manager that they're there to pick up Gram's casket and body and transport it over to a different airport. And I guess the dock manager's like, all right. And Kaufman signs some paperwork, and they're all ready to take this body and put it in their hearse. But then a police car pulls up, and it's blocking the door of the hangar, which means it's blocking Kaufman and Michael Martin in. And instead of being all afraid, Kaufman is so drunk that he's just like, "Hey, buddy, move your car." And the cop is like, "Sure, sorry." And then Kaufman's like, "And while you're here, can you help us lift this casket into the car?" And the cop's like, "Sure." And so now the police officer is unknowingly helping them commit this crime. And so they all load the casket into the back of the hearse, and they go to drive away, and Michael Martin is still really drunk, and kaboom, he crashes into the door of the hangar. And from there, the cop doesn't do anything, he just lets them drive away. And the 70s were a wild time. But anyway, then Kaufman and Michael Martin drive this hearse from the airport all the way out to Joshua Tree. Now, what Gram specifically wanted was to be cremated and have his ashes scattered across the desert. But he's not exactly cremated. So Kaufman and Michael Martin, they unload the casket and they douche it with 5 gallons of gasoline and they set it on fire. And there, they watch it burn for a bit, and, it's not exactly scattering his ashes across the desert, but, it's the best they can do. Then, they flee the area, and they start driving back to Los Angeles. But here's the thing, they're both still pretty drunk. And along the way, suddenly, boom, Michael Martin rear-ends a car. And this causes a multi-car accident. And so Highway Patrol sees this accident and they pull up and Michael Martin opens the door to the hearse and a bunch of beer cans fall out. And so the Highway Patrol is like, "Yep, these guys are drunk." And they arrest them and they put them in handcuffs. And so Kaufman and Michael Martin are standing there waiting in handcuffs while the Highway Patrol goes to check on other people involved in the accident. And that is when Kaufman and Michael Martin are like, "Fuck all this," and they jump in the hearse and they speed away. Here's the thing though. Remember, the hearse was a rundown piece of shit with no license plates. So the Highway Patrol didn't get their plates and couldn't identify them. So Kaufman and Michael Martin successfully get away. Until 5 days go by, and Kaufman and Michael Martin still haven't been caught. And the police now know Gram's body was stolen from the airport. And they've been investigating, and they've pretty much figured out it was Kaufman and Michael Martin who did it. Meanwhile, Kaufman, for some reason, he decides to rent out his house for people or movie studios to film in. And a studio actually rents out his place, and they're in the middle of filming the movie Night Moves there. And it's a movie starring a young Gene Hackman. And in the middle of that shoot, boom, police bust into Kaufman's house. And Gene Hackman just happens to be standing there watching, shocked, as bam, they arrest Kaufman. Here's a picture of him in real life. Then the next day, Michael Martin surrenders himself to police, and I unfortunately couldn't find any pictures of him online. But here's the crazy thing though. Because it's the 1970s, I guess there are no laws in place regarding stealing a dead body. So, none of this was technically illegal. And police and prosecutors don't exactly know what to charge these guys with. So they get charged with theft of the casket. Not of the body, because the human body in this time doesn't have any, monetary value. So they get charged with the theft of the casket. And Kaufman and Michael Martin are each ordered to pay a fine of $1,000 total. So after all of that, they only had to pay $1,000 fine and no jail time, and they just got away free. The 70s were insane.